sixth session as part of the climate change track that the India Climate Collaborative is hosting at Charcha 2020. We are thankful to the Nudge Foundation for getting this together in such a little time. I'll quickly give you a brief of what we've done over the last 2 days. So over the last 2 days, as part of our track, we had 6 sessions. This is the 6th one, in fact. We had 20 plus speakers with 150 plus live views on Zoom on average for each of our sessions. We would like to specially thank our partners, Climate Policy Initiative, CEW, Purpose, CINI Tata Trust, Air Pollution Action Group, and Wildlife Conservation Trust for leading these sessions. For those of you who do not know the India Climate Collaborative, ICC, as we call it, is the first ever collective response by business and philanthropy in India to drive greater climate ambition within the country. Coming to today's session, which is titled The Rationale for Tiger Conservation, a Robust Recipe to Fight Climate Change. I'll quickly give an introduction to Anish Andheria. Dr. Anish Andheria is the president of the Wildlife Conservation Trust and a member of several government committees. He's the recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Carl Zeiss Conservation Award. He is a large carnivore biologist with immense knowledge on predator-prey relationships and has contributed to several carnivore conservation projects across India. Hence, we couldn't have anyone better than Anish to speak on this topic. Anish, over to you.
Thank you, Viraj. Thank you, the Nudge Foundation. Thank you, India Climate Collaborative, and everybody who has put in a lot of sweat to get this wonderful program together. There are so many eminent speakers speaking here, and I wish I had more time, but I'm definitely going to go back to recorded videos and go through the presentation. So without further ado, Viraj, can you help me get the slides? Yes. So I work with the Wildlife Conservation Trust. As an organization, we work to conserve large landscapes. We have a 360-degree approach where we work both inside and outside protected areas. By protected areas, I mean national parks, sanctuaries, conservation reserves, community reserves. And you cannot, and we believe that you cannot protect wildlife just by securing these sanctuaries, because wildlife, and in India, you have no boundaries on the parks. The wildlife from the park disperse, and now in India, nearly 25% of all our tigers are outside. And so in fact, tiger is a guiding light, as I always say, because if you want to conserve the tiger, you need large landscapes. And when you conserve large landscapes, you are automatically conserving forests, you are stalling forest degradation, you're fighting fragmentation. And everybody knows that if you want to fight climate change, the best bet is to get the forest back. So Tiger is basically showing Wildlife Conservation Trust a way to bring the forest back and in turn fight climate change. So this topic is basically from the eyes of the tiger. I want to share with the audience as to how one can actually find cook up a perfect recipe to fight climate change. Viraj, next. I am a highly optimistic person, but even a person like me who is so optimistic gets worried when you look at all the facts and figures. In the past 70 years, the world population has tripled, and the demand for water has increased 6-fold. So you can imagine with 1.3 billion people, the kind of water that we require. And when I say water, I mean surface water, which means our forests are rain-fed. And in India, we are looking at hundreds of rivers. And the only way a population of 1.3 billion people can survive in a country like India is if we have good, secure river systems. In the last, I would say about 40-45 years, there has been a decline of 60% of the populations of vertebrate species. It's a startling figure. By vertebrate, I mean, it's not just mammals. We are talking of birds, we are talking of reptiles, we are talking of amphibians, and this is world over. So this is not just India, but this is a global phenomena. 18 of the last 19 years have been the warmest years on record. India, as you know, has been constantly subjected to erratic weather. We had floods in Kerala. Nobody had ever seen something like that. A few years back, we had flash floods up in the Uttarakhand region, and every year you lose a lot of livestock life, also a lot of loss in terms of property because of erratic climate weather behavior. And what is even more scary is if business goes as usual, which means if we continue to do what we have been doing in the last 10 years, by 2030, we will be looking at nearly 140 million climate migrants. And by climate migrants is a softer way of calling of talking about refugees. So these are migrants who are going to be forced out of the countries or the states or the cities where they are living. We are currently in the middle of one of the biggest health challenges that the world has faced. And over the last 15 days, I'm sure each one of you has seen tons of videos of my laborers who are moving out of Bombay into their villages. This is not even the tip of the iceberg. We are looking at entire countries having to migrate into the other nation. India keeps talking about a lot of migrant labor that comes into India from Bangladesh, but Bangladesh, as you know, is on the delta, and delta is formed by when the river hits the sea, all the deposition of the silt. So it is very, very vulnerable. A country like Bangladesh, a country like Maldives, even parts of West Bengal, they are highly vulnerable to sea level rise and climate change. And because the temperature is escalating at a phenomenal rate, scientists predict that there will be many feet rise in the sea levels. And when that happens, many of our coastal cities, some of the most important cities in India like Chennai, even Mumbai, which is the financial capital of the nation, is also under severe threat from climate change. So climate change is now going to throw a lot of challenges, which will then cascade into several other problems. And you know that when people are moved out from where they are living, they obviously don't have any choice anymore. And in a lot of Africa, in a lot of other nations where mass migrations have happened because of environment degradation, there has been an increase in social unrest. There has been people who because of sheer force of earning money so that they can eat food and survive a single day, people have become violent. It has become a law and order situations. Extremist groups like Boko Haram have been born. In the last 1 year, we have seen that huge amount of forests have got burnt, some deliberately, like we have seen in Brazil, where large tracts of pristine rainforest was burnt by people. And on the other hand, in Australia, because of increasing temperatures, reducing humidity, and reduction of moisture in the soil, there has been uncontrolled fire. So we have lost thousands of hectares of forest in this year. But if you go by the figures of 2017, you can imagine when there were not so many fires, the world lost nearly 16 million hectares of tree cover in that year. So you can imagine with every progressing year, because of the impact of human beings, there has been a huge amount of depletion of natural resources. Next slide, please. Well, India with 1.3 billion people, there are challenges. There is huge amount of dependence on surface water, on forests, even today. Next. 4% of the world's renewable water is found in India. However, India supports 18% of the world human population. So you can see that surface water is more important than any other country in India. Next slide. People know of tiger reserves as places which are protected for tigers. However, the fact is that even in the 50 tiger reserves that we have in India, we have only 50 tiger reserves in India. Together, it is about 2.3% of India. India is 35 lakh square kilometers. Of that, 2.3% is tiger reserve. And inside those tiger reserves, there are 3 million people. Inside the core of tiger reserves, there are 35,000 families as I talk to you. And nearly 100 million more depend for something or the other. At least about or up to about 40% of their daily subsistence comes from the resources, from natural resources or from the tiger reserve. So you can imagine the dependence of such large populations on such small areas. Next slide, please. India is an agrarian we may call ourselves, a lot of people call India as highly developed. Our very few people obviously don't like India to be called as developing. But if you look at statistics, 65% of Indians are farmers even today. And what is startling for you to know is 85% of all those farmers are subsistence farmers, which means people who have a land holding which is less than 2 hectares, which means that 85% of all farmers, which is 65% of all human beings of India, are growing crops only so that they can eat from it or have a barter exchange. So therefore, the dependence of such large number of people on rainfall and on river systems. This is very important to understand because rainfall is directly connected with the tree cover that we have in the country. Next slide, please. India also has the second largest road network on this planet after the United States of America. And today we are building the roads at a rate of 28 kilometers a day. And when I say building roads, I'm talking about 4-lane and 6-lane highways. We expect that that will reach about 44 kilometers a day in a few years' time. And India will overtake America when it comes to road length. And all these new roads or the old roads which are getting widened are further going to fragment the forest. And because of fragmentation, there will be a huge impact on movement of animals. And animals are extremely important for the forests to give you the kind of ecosystem services that it gives. Climate change, people wrongly believe that if you grow trees, we can fight climate change. Trees are just one aspect of it. A biodiverse forest has higher, much greater capacity to sequester carbon than a monoculture forest. And when you say biodiversity, it's not about plants, it's also about animals because there is huge amount of interaction between species. It is like a thick and very, very intricately woven web of life. Any species from there that is pulled out, it will imbalance that web. The only problem is that the imbalance and the impact of that imbalance is felt after many years. So there's a time lag, and that's why people don't feel worried when they see forest or a tree being cut. But actually the forest that goes down will have an impact maybe 50 years down the line. And so for the last 200 years that human beings have degraded forests all across the world is why we are facing the problem today. So we must understand that every standing tree is as important as the rainforest of Amazon. Next slide, please. And because of climate change, there is erratic behavior of weather, severe floods, droughts, and it keeps happening in a sinusoidal form. Forest fires, as we have already experienced this year, so I don't need to go much in detail. And because of the increasing temperature and humidity regimes, the cropping patterns have changed and huge amount of crop loss has been seen, especially in fruiting trees up in the mountains. Next slide. And when you fragment forests, when you degrade large forest tracts, obviously wildlife has nowhere to go. And therefore the interaction between wild animals and human beings have gone up. In fact, COVID-19, the disease that we are all reeling under, is also an offshoot of years of degradation and of hunting of animals. So the interaction between human beings and wildlife has increased either because of bushmeat trade or because of degradation and fragmentation. And the kind of human wildlife interactions are happening. People are perceiving animals as threat and they are calling these interactions conflict. And once it's categorized as conflict, the reaction that you see from a crowd is completely different. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that even if the forest is standing, because of continuous degradation or fragmentation, you are going to have large amount of interactions and a lot of animals will lose life because a lot of animals have been burnt alive, stoned to death when they have come out in human habitations. Next slide. There has always been a pressure on wildlife from the illegal trade, largely fueled by China and Vietnam, but a lot of Southeast Asian countries use wildlife body parts. Tigers, elephants, rhinos, pangolins, these are some of those mammals that are impacted, but illegal trade pretty much impacts sharks, seahorses, whales. So that number just keeps going on. India has good amount of protection, but there is always a pressure from the international mafias. And because all these animals are traded, not for cash, but for drugs, they are traded for ammunition and they're traded for humans. So wildlife trade goes hand in hand with three of the world's most deadliest trade, that is ammunition, drugs, and human trade. Next slide. So despite having so many issues, how is it that India has still been able to manage to protect such biodiverse forests? The main reason is the Declaration of Wildlife Protection Act in 1972, and then a subsequent declaration of the Forest Conservation Act in 1980. This beautiful photo I had taken in Bandipur Tiger Reserve. You can imagine the size of the forest. The elephant looks like an ant, but mind you, that elephant is nearly 3,500 kgs, and the tusks are almost touching the ground. And so if the Wildlife Protection Act didn't come into being in, say, 1972, we would have probably lost most of our large mammals. We would have also lost a lot of our forests. But these two acts are extremely important. They were enacted in 1972 and 1980 when late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was in charge. Currently, the government has constituted several special tiger protection force in several tiger reserves. The patrolling is also very systematic since the last 4 or 5 years. It's called M-Stripe, where the patrolling log is kept on a GPS and all that is collated. So the field directors of many of our tiger reserves get constantly are updated about areas which are not being patrolled or areas which are under severe threat. So the government is taking a lot of measures to reduce the pressure on the forest. They have also, the NTCA, that is National Tiger Conservation Authority, have actually gone in and come up with a law which says that if they find a dead tiger, it will be treated as a poached tiger unless the forest department can prove that it died naturally. So which puts a lot of pressure on the field directors, and which is a good thing. And nowadays it's almost always that whenever an animal is dead, we hear about it. In the past, say maybe 20 years ago, many tigers would disappear without anybody realizing where they went. Next slide. The frontline forest staff is recruited from local communities, and so therefore they see the sense in protection of wildlife. Most people who feel alienated because of conservation will actually never support wild animals around their houses. So the way the forest department functions now is a lot of their guards and the watchers are hired from people who either living in the forest or around it. Even the forest department also raises a lot of livelihood programs. So there are people in the communities that actually get hired to either fight fire or make roads. So there is huge amount of money that is being made by local communities through forestry work. There are national boards of wildlife and state board of wildlife as well. Every state has a state board of wildlife. So any project that is infringing into a protected area or a corridor or eco-sensitive zone or even a forest land has to first go for clearance to these boards. Only when these boards clear them is when the projects can go on. So these are important measures that our government is taking. Next slide, please. There is prompt monetary compensation. So there are huge number of cattle and livestock around our protected areas. There is a huge amount of injury that is caused either to these cattle. There can, because of the interaction between people and wildlife, some human beings do lose their lives, but the forest department compensates for the loss of cattle and also for injury and death of human beings very promptly. More than the death of cattle, the poor population who are doubly marginalized around the forest are reeling under the pressure from crop depredation, which means the deer and antelope constantly go and raid their crops, and there is huge amount of loss for the farmers, and the government is trying to compensate for this. It's not very easy. They're trying to set up joint forest management committees where people and forest department jointly protect that area to get a buy-in from the people to get the forest back. Next slide. Next slide, please. There are a lot of, as I said, nearly 35,000 families living inside our tiger reserves even today. But the government has introduced a voluntary resettlement program over the last 7 or 8 years, several thousand families have voluntarily moved outside some of our tiger reserve cores, thereby creating inviolate spaces for wildlife. That has actually boosted the populations of wildlife, and all these resettlement programs are jointly funded by the state, largely the state, but also by the NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority. There are programs and schemes like Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Janvan Yojana at least in Maharashtra, where the villages that are situated inside the core or inside the buffer zone, or sometimes even in the corridor region, get additional funding from the government so that they can install solar lamps, so that they can insulate themselves from wildlife. That is helping in improving the relationship between the local communities and the people. Anyways, India is blessed because our culture is such that we are very, very closely connected with nature, and that is, I think, one of the main reasons why we still have wildlife in India, apart from the protection that is being given to the forest. Next slide, please. India is probably the only country in the subcontinent that's investing such large amounts of money. Nearly 250 crores were spent to build several underpasses on a stretch of road that was cutting through the forest. This is a road that is cutting through the corridor between Pench and Nagzira Navegaon. In another stretch, actually the road passes through the buffer zone of Pench Tiger Reserve, and the government has actually pumped in nearly 250 crores to build this kind of elevated passages in between so that animals can move underneath. Local communities are also involved in running tourism outfits around their guides, all the drivers, everybody comes from the local communities. Therefore, the forest is then looked at as a money earning business, and therefore there is a positive reinforcement in the kind of relationship that the people enjoy with the forest. Next slide, please. And because of all that, and because of the culture, because of the tolerance of the Indians, today, as I talk to you, we have 869 protected areas in India. However, the area that comes under these parks is about 5% of the country. So it's not such a huge area, but it's still quite commendable. Knowing about the kind of problems that we have, India is the only country on earth that has 3 large cats, that is the lion, the leopard, and the tiger. India has 70% of all Asian elephants, 85% of all one-horned rhinos, and 100% of all Asiatic lions. So in 2020, India actually has seen an increase in wildlife population, not the other way around. Next slide, please. And all these efforts that have gone in has resulted in several such beautiful forests. This picture I had taken in Corbett Tiger Reserve early morning in winter. If you measure the net present value of Indian forest, it is more than the GDP of Canada. But you must remember that the forest should not just be measured in the present value, because the value of the forest is for unborn generations as well. So in fact, this value that I'm putting here is actually a small fraction of the actual value of the forest. So whenever there is a question whether you need a forest or you need a golf course, and when people say that the golf course actually is going to earn a lot more money, you must understand that a golf course can never, ever replace a forest in terms of the ecosystem services that the forest is giving us. Next slide, please. 600 rivers. Why protect tigers? People ask me. 600 rivers originate from or are fed by tiger-bearing forests. So if there are no tigers, which means if there are no forests, there will be no tiger. And if there is no forest, you will also have no rivers. If you have no river, you can imagine what will happen to those 65% of Indians who are dependent on rivers for agriculture. Next slide. And thanks to our culture, thanks to the protection, thanks to the human population, the people who live in India, India is highly biodiverse. We are just 2.4% as far as the world area is concerned, but the biodiversity is about 8%. 1,300 species of birds, more than 400 species of mammals, 25,000 species of flowering plants, and about 1,500 species of butterfly. Just as an example, Great Britain supports 64 species of butterflies. Bombay alone has more than 160 species of butterflies. Next slide, please. Forests, and most people say that, you know, there is a lot of livestock and that is destroying the forest. While that is true, what is important is that these cattle that are eating into our forests are actually feeding those families. So currently, while these are degrading the forest, but they are supporting 40% of the energy needs of the people of India and 30% of the fodder needs. So if these forests were not there, you wouldn't even have these pasture lands and the foliage for the cattle to survive. So people who argue for cattle against forest should be told that if there were no forest, we would really, it is impossible for the farmers and for the herders to have such large stock of animals. Next slide. This is interesting for people, for businessmen. You need to know, we always talk of return on investment. And if we look at the amount of money that the government puts in to protect this 5% of India, the returns in terms of ecosystem services. What are ecosystem services? Temperature regulation, water, food, pollination, germination, all that all these animals, plants together put in, and climate change mitigation. All of it, if you evaluate all that, then 1 rupee investment in protection of the forest is actually giving us a return of 530. No business on the earth, on this planet, can give you profits of this value. So it is impossible to pitch a business against what Mother Nature is giving us. So this bee is actually pollinating the flower, and that's very important to understand. Next slide.
Anish, we are actually left with the last few minutes.
Yes, so it's ending. It's ending.
Yeah. So do you want to take some questions?
No, I just want to finish one more slide.
Okay.
So India's forest, and this is just 5% of India's forest, is supporting livelihoods of 300 million people. So it is not forest versus people, we have to understand. It is forest and people, and forest and mitigation of climate change. So when somebody, from now on, when you hear about a forest or a tiger, you should actually hear the word livelihood generation, climate change mitigation. So forest is synonymous with all that. Now I'm ready to take questions now.
Yeah. So Anish, there is actually a question from the organizers team. They just messaged it to me. I'll read it out for you. So one of the questions is, are we focusing too much on tiger for conservation, ignoring other endangered species?
Yeah, it's an important question, but tiger is just an umbrella species. What it means is that for conserving tigers, you have to conserve large landscapes. And if you conserve large landscapes, you will conserve millions of organisms that live within that landscape. So if I was focusing on just a frog, somebody might tell me that you can conserve a frog in your backyard in a pond. But for a tiger, a male tiger has a range of nearly 250 square kilometers. So a city like Bombay, which is 500 square kilometers, will probably hold not more than 10 tigers, and these 10 tigers will cover the entire city. So to protect 10 tigers, you need to conserve an area which is 500 square kilometers. And that's why tiger becomes a symbol for conservation. And automatically you have so many other species, thousands of other species of plants and animals that can live where the tigers are living. However, tigers cannot be used as a proxy for all habitats. Like in the Himalayas where tigers are not found, we have to think of snow leopards. In the deserts, we have to think of the wild ass. And if in the sea, we have to talk of the shark. But all these animals have to be animals which are large ranging, which are predatory, because for predators to survive, you need a very, very strong ecosystem and the food chain. That's why tiger is a symbol. But tiger actually is just like a flag of India. When you show the flag, you know it's about the country. In the same way, a tiger stands for the forests of India. That's why we talk of tigers. But anybody and everybody who talks of tigers actually want to protect every single bee and microbes that's found in the forest.
Yeah, maybe I'll take one more question and then we can wrap this up. So there was a question, how do we contribute effectively to tiger conservation on an individual level where do we direct philanthropic support for this cause?
So at an individual level, I want to talk about the cliched things: reduce, reuse. You should try and have a simpler lifestyles. If you are a philanthropist, then you must study what various NGOs are doing. You must go and actually see what they are doing on the ground. Ask them how their projects are sustained, how their projects are scalable, whether they are just talking about wildlife or they are also talking about communities. Those conservation programs that take into consideration the interest of both wildlife and communities are the best to support. And only when you have happy people living around tiger habitats will you have tigers, elephants, and the bees there. Wherever there is unrest, the forest dies, and we know again and again in several countries similar things have happened. So I think there is huge amount of scope for money and to put your money in a very effective manner. And if you invest in conservation, you will actually invest in a better life of generations unborn, not just the population that's living right now.
Thank you so much, Anish. I think this was extremely informative. I know for a fact that I learned a lot of things around tiger conservation and why it is so important for India. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sure all of us would want to learn more about this. So yeah, do keep following Anish. He's very active on Instagram. You'll also get to see a lot of photographs there.